I found out I wasn't invited the way you find out most things in this family. Not in a conversation, not with eye contact, but in a message that sounded polite enough to hide the blade. Hey, just wanted to let you know the guest list is finalized and we had to make some tough cuts. Hope you understand. Love you. Tough cuts. I read it, then read it again, and for a few seconds my brain tried to protect me by treating it like a mistake. Maybe she sent it to the wrong thread, maybe she meant to say something else, maybe I was missing the follow-up where she told me I'd be sitting at the family table, laughing in photos like we'd always been close. But there was no follow-up. There was just the neat little period at the end, and the quiet implication that I was expendable. Laura is my sister. Not a distant cousin. Not a step anything. Not a childhood friend who drifted away. My sister. The same sister I drove across state lines when her car died on the shoulder in the rain. The same sister who slept on my couch for 3 months after her last breakup because being alone in that apartment made her panic. The same sister who called me at 2 in the morning when she was convinced she'd ruined her life and needed someone to talk her back from the edge. I had always been the person she called when things felt unstable. I had just never been the person she thought of when things were supposed to look perfect. I stared at the message until my eyes went dry. Then I did the stupid thing you do when you still believe there's a rational explanation hiding somewhere. I called Mom. She picked up on the second ring, bright and breezy, like the universe hadn't just shifted under my feet. Hey, sweetheart, what's up? I just got a message from Laura, I said. My voice came out calm, which surprised me. She says the guest list is finalized and I'm not on it. There was a pause, small but clean. The kind of pause that doesn't happen when someone is confused. The kind that happens when someone is deciding how to package the truth so it sounds like your fault. Oh, honey, Mom sighed, and I could already hear the version of me she wanted. Easy, understanding, low maintenance. You're overreacting. It's just a wedding. Just a wedding. I repeated it because sometimes repeating something out loud helps your brain accept that a person actually said it. Mom, I'm her brother. How am I not invited to my own sister's wedding? It's not personal, she said, as if that sentence had ever made anything feel less personal. They had to keep the guest list small. I pulled up Laura's Instagram with my thumb, because the internet doesn't lie as smoothly as people do. Her last post was a shiny carousel of engagement photos and bridal brunch smiles. And in the comments she was tagging people with hearts. A lot of people. More than small. I just saw Laura's post, I said. She invited like 150 people. Silence, then a thin laugh. Well, you know how things are. Weddings are expensive. And maybe they assumed you wouldn't mind skipping this one. Wouldn't mind. As if being left out was a favor, like they were letting me off the hook. I didn't even get angry right away. That came later. First came the familiar cold feeling of being assigned a role without being asked. The reliable one. The one who doesn't need reassurance. The one who can be cut because he'll survive the cut. Mom, I said. I helped her move twice. When she lost her job, I covered half her rent. When she spiraled after that breakup, I was the one who kept picking up the phone. And now I'm not good enough to be there? Oh, stop being dramatic, Mom said. And there it was. The dismissal that always arrived right when I tried to name what hurt. It's one day. The day they would all dress up and take photos and swear loyalty and pretend the family was intact, while the person they leaned on for years sat outside the frame. I laughed once, short and humorless. Right? One day. I could see the whole pattern unfolding before it happened. I would argue. Mom would minimize. Laura would send a half apology later. Soft words, no accountability, and everyone would expect me to swallow it because swallowing is what I've always done. Not this time. That night, before I booked anything, I sat on my couch and tried to remember the last time Laura had looked at me like I belonged in her life without needing me to do something first. I could name the emergencies: flat tire, late rent, panic attacks, the long, "Can you talk?" calls that always started with her voice shaking and ended with mine making promises I wasn't sure I could keep. But I struggled to name the ordinary moments, the easy ones, the ones where being siblings was enough. And when I realized how hard I was searching, the anger finally arrived, not as a shout, but as a slow heat behind my ribs, because it wasn't the wedding that cut deepest. It was the casual certainty that my absence wouldn't matter until they needed my hands. I opened our old text thread and scrolled back months, watching the pattern reveal itself like a stain. "Are you free? Can you help? Do you know how to?" My replies were always fast, always yes, always some version of "don't worry, I'll handle it." I saw the one time I'd asked for something, just dinner, just a catch-up, nothing dramatic, and her response had been a heart emoji and a vague soon. Soon never came. That was the moment I understood something simple and brutal. I wasn't being excluded from a celebration. I was being reassigned to the background, where I'd always been expected to stay. I ended the call without saying goodbye. No dramatic click, no speech, just silence. Then I did something that felt childish and oddly adult at the same time. I opened my laptop and started looking up flights. If I wasn't wanted at Laura's wedding, I was not going to sit in my apartment like a placeholder, waiting for the family group chat to start buzzing and pretending it didn't sting. I was going to be somewhere else. Somewhere with sunlight and strangers and no expectation that I would make myself smaller to fit the story they were telling. Took less than an hour. I booked an all-inclusive resort on a tropical island, ocean view, ridiculous amenities, the kind of place I always told myself was too much because I was responsible, because I was practical, because I was the one who saved money just in case. Well, this was the case. I wasn't just taking a vacation. I was drawing a line. When the wedding weekend arrived, I was already on a plane, leaning back in a seat that actually reclined, sipping champagne that tasted like I'd paid for the right to breathe. I posted a photo. Legs stretched out, drink in hand, sky outside the window, and I kept the caption simple. Got cut from the guest list. I think I'll survive. The reactions came fast. A few cousins sent laughing emojis. Aunt Lisa, the only one who ever said the quiet part out loud, commented, "Good for you. Should have taken me with you." Mom didn't laugh. Mom texted 3 times in a row. "Where are you? Are you seriously missing your sister's wedding over this? You're being petty." Petty. I replied with a photo of the beach, white sand, water the color of a fresh bruise turning blue, and a single line. Perfect view. Then I turned my phone on Do Not Disturb. For the first time in years, I didn't put my family first. I put myself first. And I won't pretend it didn't feel incredible. The decision to leave wasn't impulsive, even if it might have looked that way from the outside. In reality, it had been forming for years, slowly, like a crack in a wall you don't notice until one day it becomes too large to ignore. The wedding was only the trigger, the final sign in a long chain of small exclusions, forgotten promises, and unspoken expectations that I would always be there, but never truly included. I wasn't going to stay home, scrolling through social media, watching my family celebrate without me, as if I were some unnecessary detail that could be cropped out of the frame. If my absence meant so little to them, then I decided it would mean something to me. The vacation wasn't an escape. It was a choice. A place where no one knew me, where nothing was expected of me, where I wasn't the reliable one. Even on the plane, I felt the tension that had lived in my shoulders for years begin to loosen. It wasn't happiness yet. It was relief, the kind that comes when you finally stop standing guard. When I arrived at the resort, the world seemed to slow down. Sunlight, ocean air, the smell of salt. Everything felt like the opposite of what was happening back home. There, everything revolved around schedules, guests, appearances, and pressure. Here, it revolved around simple things: warmth, light, quiet. And for once, silence didn't feel heavy. It felt kind. I allowed myself to enjoy the small things. Slow breakfasts, walks without a destination, days without calls or messages where every vibration of my phone used to mean another problem I was expected to solve. I didn't feel guilty, not the way I normally would have. Something inside me had shifted. Maybe I was simply tired of being the adult for everyone else. Messages started coming in closer to the evening. First, I ignored them. I already knew their shape. Confusion, irritation, attempts to pull me back into my old role. But soon the number of missed calls grew too large to dismiss. This wasn't annoyance. This was panic. That's when I realized something had gone wrong. The details reached me in fragments, through other people, through messages that slipped past my silence. The wedding that was supposed to be perfect was unraveling in real time. Tension that had been buried for years finally surfaced. Old resentments, unspoken accusations. People who had smiled at each other for decades suddenly stopped pretending. I learned that it started with a conflict no one took seriously. Then it grew louder, bigger, uncontrollable. What was meant to be a celebration turned into chaos. And the more I learned, the clearer one truth became. They all believed I should have been there to fix it. That was the irony. The same person they didn't think needed to be invited. The one they could do without. The one whose presence suddenly felt essential only after everything began to fall apart. I sat by the ocean, watching waves roll in and retreat, and felt a strange mix of calm and clarity. I was no longer responsible for repairing something built without me. And for the first time, that didn't feel cruel. It felt honest. The next morning, I woke up early, before the sun had fully risen above the horizon. The air was cool, the ocean still, and the silence felt almost sacred. Standing on the balcony with a cup of coffee, I thought about how easily everything could have been different if honesty had existed in our family before things reached a breaking point. The messages didn't stop. New numbers appeared. Old patterns repeated themselves. Everyone wanted my attention again. Everyone needed me. And all of it carried the same expectation, that I would return, take responsibility, and restore order. That was the moment it truly ended. I finally understood that, to them, I wasn't a person. I was a function, a stabilizer, someone who appeared when things collapsed. But when everything looked good on the surface, I became optional. Invisible. I wasn't angry. That mattered. Anger would have meant they still had power over me. Instead, I felt a quiet sadness mixed with relief. I allowed myself to accept the truth I had sensed for years but never named. I had never been an equal part of that family. I was a backup plan. The days passed peacefully. I extended my stay, not out of spite, not to prove a point, but because for the first time in years, I didn't want to return to a place where I was only needed when something broke. I allowed myself to exist without being the rescuer, without expectations, without obligation. When I thought about the wedding, I no longer imagined dresses, music, or guests. I imagined one empty seat, the one that should have been mine, and I realized it had been empty long before that day. Now it was simply visible. I don't know how their relationships unfolded after that. I only know that nothing returned to how it was before, and maybe that was inevitable. Some family structures survive only on silence. When that silence breaks, the illusion collapses with it. I returned home changed, not bitter, not distant, just honest with myself. I stopped answering calls that sounded like demands. I stopped explaining my boundaries. I simply started having them. Sometimes late at night, I think back to that message about tough cuts. At the time, it felt like humiliation. Now I see it as the beginning of understanding that love without reciprocity isn't love. It's habit. And that being needed isn't the same as being valued. I didn't destroy my family. I just stopped being the thing holding it together. And in the quiet that followed, I finally felt myself breathe fully. Not for anyone else. For me. Some stories don't end with apologies. They end with understanding. If this story felt familiar, you're not alone. Thank you for listening. This was Block Tales.